أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. لله ما في السماوات وما في الأرض وإن تبدوا ما في أنفسكم أو تخفوه يحاسبكم به الله فيغفر لمن يشاء ويعذب من يشاء والله على كل شيء قدير. آمن الرسول بما أنزل إليه من ربه والمؤمنون كل آمن بالله وملائكته وكتبه ورسله لا نفرق بين أحد من رسله وقالوا سمعنا وأطعنا غفرانك ربنا وإليك المصير. لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها لها ما كسبت وعليها ما اكتسبت ربنا لا تؤاخذنا إن نسينا أو أخطأنا ربنا ولا تحمل علينا إصرا كما حملته على الذين من قبلنا ربنا ولا تحملنا ما لا طاقة لنا به واعف عنا واغفر لنا وارحمنا أنت مولانا فانصرنا على القوم الكافرين. صدق الله العظيم.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Respected guests from Pakistan, from Saudi Arabia, from Malaysia, and of course respected guests from South Africa, we welcome you this evening. This is, well, not exactly the first program. We've had two already this morning. There was one at Al-Falah School where Professor Ahmad addressed the teachers, and then we had a second one at 2 o'clock here at NMJ where we met with Muslim NGOs, and they spoke about their programs and activities and so on. So this actually is a third program, but this is a public lecture where Professor Ahmad is going to talk to us about the global challenges facing the Ummah. Now I'm going to very briefly give you a resume of Professor Ahmad. He has a PhD from Temple University, that's in the USA. The academic positions he's held. He was a Dean of the Faculty of Islamic Revealed Knowledge and Human Sciences at the International Islamic University in Malaysia. He was Vice President of the International Islamic University in Islamabad, the founder Dean of the Faculty of Social Sciences at the International Islamic University in Islamabad, the founder Dean of the Faculty of Usuluddin at the International Islamic University Islamabad, the founder Director General of the Dawah Academy of the International Islamic University Islamabad, the Vice Chairman of the Institute of Policy Studies in Islamabad, the President of the Association of Muslim Social Scientists in the USA. His teaching experience includes the following: the Appalachian State University in North California, the Lanzhou University in China, Temple University in Philadelphia, the National Islamic University in Malaysia, the National Islamic University in Islamabad, Pakistan, the Karachi University in Karachi, National Defense Universities in Islamabad, Foreign Service Academy, Islamabad, Federal Judicial Academy, Islamabad, National Institutes of Public Administration, Pakistan, Staff Colleges and War Colleges, the Sharia Academy of the IIU, Islamabad, and other academic institutions. He had received the university fellowship at Temple University from 1969 to 1971. He has a host of publications. I'm not going to read them because it will take us the whole night. I'm just going to mention the areas of publication. He's written on secularism, he's written on fundamentalism, he's written on Sayyid Abul Ala Maududi, as you know, the founder of Jamaat-e-Islami in Pakistan, on revivalist movements, on politics, on Muslim minorities, on women, on dawah, on the Quran, on education. These are just briefly some of the themes that he has covered. He has also published articles in several encyclopedias. He's participated in international conferences in many, many countries. I can just run through them quickly. Australia, Bahrain, Canada, Guyana, Hungary, Iran, Japan, Malaysia, Mauritius, Nepal, New Zealand, Saudi Arabia, South Africa, Sri Lanka, Turkey, Trinidad and Tobago, United Arab Emirates, United Kingdom and the USA. If you want a full CV, of course, you can get it on Google. This one was taken from Wikipedia, so I hope it's correct, because Wikipedia, as you know, is always subject to alteration. I hope it's correct, Professor Sab. All right, the subject, it's a global challenges facing the Ummah. I'm not going to say much, but as you know, the Ummah is facing challenges at all levels. We have economic challenges, we have political challenges, we have educational challenges, we have social challenges, we have ideological challenges of all types. And really speaking, very often when we look at the image of the global Ummah, it can depress you. Sometimes you may feel very helpless and you think that there is no escape. But I think as Muslims we look at the verse in the Quran, La taqnatu min rahmatillah, and we take hope from that. Never despair of the mercy of Allah. In other words, you don't ever give up hope. As long as you are committed, and as long as you are willing to make a change, you can make a change. So I think the defeatism that we find in some quarters of the Muslim world is not helpful at all. And also some of the methodologies that we are using to meet the challenges are also not helpful at all. So we need to understand what the challenges are, and we need to know what strategies that are most effective in meeting those particular challenges. And I think that Professor Ahmad is the most eminent personality to actually speak about these challenges and also tell us about how we should actually approach them and what strategies should we use. So with these words of introduction, I would like to call to the podium Professor Ahmad. Bismillah. Okay, I just forgot, Professor Ahmad Khan reminded me, the most important thing I forgot to say, he's the Vice Chancellor of the Rifai University. Sorry about that.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala khatamil anbiya. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. I'm thankful to Manara Chamber of Commerce for inviting me. I always feel at home in South Africa. I have so many friends and brothers. I just met some brothers who have been known to me for quite some time. I'm also thankful for detailed introduction. I don't need that. It was enough to call my name, and that should be enough. Professor Suleiman has talked about challenges, and perhaps one common feeling that we all face is when we look into those challenges, quite often we are depressed. I will try in next few minutes to look into what we mean by Muslim Ummah and what kind of optimism we may have. When we talk about Muslim Ummah, usually people think that it's a kind of hypothetical Ummah that exists somewhere in the minds of philosophers but does not have a physical existence. It is known fact, it's not ethnic Ummah but an ideological Ummah. It is not linguistic, it's not territorial, it's not racial, it's not nationalistic. In my understanding, it stands for moderation, for wasat and adl. It stands for virtue and bir. It stands for maroof or good. It stands for brotherly attitude and environment. And it stands for moral commitment or taqwa. It's a community which joins in all these aspects. The Quran declares a leadership role for this ummah. In the Quran, it's a qualitative ummah, a community with a mission to be carrier of message of peace, justice, truth, trust, and supremacy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. We are familiar with these Quranic references where it tells us that we are going to be responsible for not only enjoining among ourselves what is right or ethically good, but also to invite whole of mankind by realizing these principles. How Ummah is perceived by others. Usually we are called as people who are violent, fundamentalist, extremist, backward looking, discriminatory towards non-Muslims, and quite often anti-democracy. Whenever an Islamic movement or group talks about Islamic State, it's interpreted as recoiling of history, going back to pre-scientific age. And therefore, Ummah is understood and projected by others in quite negative terms. How Muslims perceive themselves of this Ummah. First thing that comes to their mind is Ummah is disunited. And therefore, we may be large in number, but on basic issues we don't find unity. Ummah is perceived by us, ourselves, as politically unstable. Therefore, in most of Muslim countries you find political instability. We are quite often perceived, and the fact or the matter is that we are economically dependent and not independent. And then technologically lagging behind, that Muslim Ummah does not have resources and is always towing others in technology. And quite often we perceive ourselves as culturally confused. We don't know our identity. Are we a nation? Are we an Ummah? Are we a linguistic group or whatnot? And then intellectually deficient, that we are consumers of ideas and not producers of ideas. That's how we perceive ourselves. Then what are challenges facing us? The major one, I think, is essentially globalization of economy, politics, education and culture. The term has been used both in its positive and negative sense. In a positive sense, it brings connectivity. But in negative sense, it's a euphemism for colonialism, where you find certain parts of the world, North particularly, coming up with its own economic doctrines and assuming that those economic doctrines are the ultimate truth. And same for political system. In any Muslim country or in the world, unless they conform with political norms of the West, they are regarded underdeveloped, intellectually backward people. And then education. If in my country you don't talk in fluent English, you are a mullah, a backward person, a remnant of colonialism, that unless you talk in English, you are not intellectual. Education and the system of education is implemented in most of Muslim countries no different than what exists in the West. And definitely if your goals of education, targets are same, materialism, individualism, relativism, then the products cannot be different. Therefore, Globalization of economy, education, and political thought is one major challenge, and we have to come out of it without alienating ourselves. Then unipolarism, where you find that most of Muslim countries, they may not like, but they always think what policies will be liked by Washington, who will be welcome there. And consequently, unipolarism has gone deep in our souls and mind. Demonization of Islam, that Islam is presented in a way that you are compelled to be apologetic. Islam is projected in most negative terms in the West as well in the East. Then materialism, which has somehow crept in, anyone who claims to be Islamically committed, if looks critically in his own heart, will find if he has 3 or 4 children, then he would like them to live prosperous life. He would like them to become engineers, medical doctors, not to serve humanity, but to make more money. And therefore, it has gone deep in our soul. Individualism, that we should have many Islams, many objectives of people, everyone his own ethical standards, no one should interfere, and consequently we end up in ethical relativism, liberalism, and ultimately media war, which is an enormous challenge. Today you find our own national information networks simply reproduce what is said by the West, and consequently day and night people hear about Muslims as terrorists. They discriminate, they are not progressive, they are not looking forward, and all these aspects constitute challenges that we are facing today. We forget that there are certain strengths of Muslim Ummah. Among those strengths, first and foremost is that we are a young Ummah. You find over 60% people of Muslim world are youth. Yet, unfortunately, the old guards have not yet been able to come out of their mentality. Those who are seniors always think it is they who founded movements, it is they who develop institutions, and therefore they must remain there and you should be in the background. We are young Ummah, yet we have not given chance to our youth. We have not given them confidence. We have not trusted them. We think that we did trial and errors for ourselves and that's enough. I believe youth can be better leaders than elders if we only give them chance to do small errors. They will have big achievements. And therefore, although we are young Ummah, but we have not realized that. Second, we have not been aware of how rich we are in our natural resources. Energy resources are in Muslim world. You find that in some Muslim countries which are considered poor because of their international debt, but these countries have enormous resources. Those have never been tapped and used. For Pakistan, I can say with confidence, we have second largest coal reserve in the world. We never used it. We are fourth largest producer of milk and sixth for fruit. We never realized that. Pakistan has enormous resources, but we are experts in mismanagement of resources. We mismanage everything. And therefore, we end up usually in frustration. While we have enormous resources on which you can feel trust. Then the power of faith, which I don't find anywhere else. Muslims are the only Ummah which have that power which can shake the world. Many situations in which people feel frustrated, Muslims feel proud. And therefore, this power of faith has not been properly approached. And then we are not a group landlocked somewhere, not a nation confined to a color or race, but Muslims have global presence. Even in the heartland of those areas where Muslims are regarded aliens, they are there, they make their presence felt, they make their presence distinct. Places like NASA, it's Muslim scientists who are there. Most of hospitals in North America, with which I am more familiar, have majority of medical doctors who are Muslims. If for 2 days Muslim medical doctors withdraw from the Britain, they will have collapse of the health services. Unfortunately, we never realize how strong we are. We always think we are weak, dependent, and not able to cope with our problems. What should be our future strategy? In very simple words, clarity of vision. If we don't have vision, we stand nowhere. Our problem is lack of vision. Our problem is we are bogged down by everyday problems. Our problem is we don't look beyond. We are more concerned about present, never about future. Just this afternoon, I was, after taking food from the upper level, was looking around, and I found that the parking area you have is not just a piece of land, it's a piece of gold, where you feel happy by parking 200 or 400 cars. But if that area is properly underutilized, you can make 2 full floors of parking and upper 2 floors for university. You don't need more than that for university. And yet, you'll spend not a single penny on land. Future means visioning, thinking about future, how things should take place. If Muslim community has schools and colleges, well and good, but do you want to have your treasures of youth given to universities to mold them into same materialistic persons around? Do you want them to become same bureaucrats and merchants and lawyers and medical doctors who are there to make money? Or you want to have higher education with a purpose? If you want to have that, then you must have a vision for the future. Vision means you think 100 years from now. Vision means if there were pioneers in this land who established mosques, schools, Jamaat Khanas and whatnot, then what is next? What after that? When these generations are gone, how will the coming generations live and progress? That is visioning. Determining what are your goals and objectives for next 50 years and 100 years. Second, what needs to be done is development of self-reliance through education, economy, culture and media. Self-reliance doesn't mean simply economy. It's a matter of education. We should have our own educational institutions, not for Muslims, but for everyone. Muslims have done very good to survive. Survival for me is no problem at all. Not enough at all. What we need is to go beyond survival and make a difference in society and community. That can only take place when schools are not only for Muslims, but for everyone, with those values which are the basis of Sharia. Those values are given by the Quran and Sunnah. And these values are universal and global. These are not monopoly of Muslims. These are not for Muslims alone, but for the whole of humanity. And that calls for widening of horizon. That calls for looking critically to our own achievements. That calls for coming up with a new approach where Islam is not for Muslims, but for the whole of humanity. It cannot be done by saying, implement Sharia, but by implementing principles of Sharia. Sharia is based on those principles which are essentially for human beings. If Sharia says you must preserve life, it's not life of Muslim alone, life of everyone. If Sharia says you have to be just and fair, it's not for Muslims alone. Why we cannot have a society based on fairness, on justice, dignity and honor? And all those principles need to be integrated in curricula, in textbooks, teaching methodology, and ultimately at the highest level of education. Therefore, it's not a matter of empowerment through economy. It's empowerment through education with a integrated and comprehensive approach where we don't have that dualism that exists in the East and the West. Dualism of Dini Madaris, religious schools who are responsible for theology, and college university is responsible for material life. I think unless we merge these together, unless we open up for ourselves and for others, there is no way for having self-reliance. Similarly, self-reliance in culture. Culture does not mean wearing a specific kind of dress that's highly superficial. We assume that if we are wearing a specific kind of shirt and dress, then we are culturally affiliated to Islam. It's our short-sightedness. Islam came to change all cultures from their essence and existence. Yet, it allowed to maintain manifestations depending on the availability of resources. Islam never came to tell Central Asians, you must wear a cotton shirt, but ask them to prepare for themselves material which is good in winter. And therefore, it's not a matter of one single kind of dress, uniform. It's a matter of one single mindset, one single set of values. A dress that gives you dignity, a dress that protects you, a dress that gives you acceptance in community and society. Therefore, culture has to be liberated. Culture which has become a matter of identity for youth particularly. Unless they wear Levi's jeans, they think they are not youth. That needs to be changed. They need to have their own needs met, but in a different way. And ultimately, self-reliance in media, I do not think anywhere in the world today we listen to news which is true. We listen to news which is filtered, colored, which has been modified, and which has been put in a manner that certain concepts stick to our memory. In between the lines, a very simple message is given in every news. That means we have to liberate ourselves from this problem and come up with our own media policy and understanding. Networking in research and development projects, wherever Muslims are working, They cannot work in isolation. It's time for collaborative research, collaboration in every single area. And therefore, future strategy has to take into consideration these aspects. I thought I should take shortest possible time for after dinner talk, and perhaps my brothers and colleagues and sisters who are here may be able to make their own contribution, and with our interaction perhaps we can find better solutions for our issues and problems. Jazakallahu khairan. Thank you very much. Any questions, contributions, please? Please.
There's always been a debate about how we should be responding to Iran.
Muslim community globally has faced several challenges. Among those, one is theological. And in that theological challenge, from beginning, we face the issue of Khawarij, we face the issue of Shia theology, we face the issue of some sects within Shiism who emerged as secretive sects and cause serious problem for Muslim intellectuals, Hashishin and so on and so forth. And similarly, later developments where people came up with false claims of prophethood. So it's not for the first time we are facing theological challenge from the beginning. Nevertheless, when you look from the perspective of non-Muslims, whether it's unipolar power or any other world power, Muslims remain Muslim. When shaitan and kufr and taghut comes, they never ask for your fiqhi maslak. They only know you are Muslim, therefore you are targeted. In that sense, I don't think we can differentiate. Secondly, if there are certain countries with declared fiqhi position, they have a right. If a country declares state fiqh will be Hanbali or Maliki, no one objects. Then why when they declare fiqh Jafari one should object? It's their right. On national issues, international issues, if it interests Muslim Ummah, then I think we must go for unity and support. If Palestine is our issue, and on that we need to have unity in Muslim Ummah, then whether they are Shia or Sunni or any other sect, they need to be taken into confidence and they need to be consulted, counseled and united. What we can do perhaps is that develop environment of dialogue instead of deadlock. Right now we have a deadlock. But a dialogue means that even those persons who may appear having differences in fiqh, but when they are approached, I am sure they are bound to realize their extremist views and shall have to modify. I have personally encountered people who take positions no different than Ahlus Sunnah. And they are supposed to be some of their top-ranking leaders, and yet they practice Shiism. So there is always a possibility of collaboration, always a possibility of involving our brothers from both schools of thought and bring them together on international issues that Muslim Ummah is facing. Any other contributions, questions? Yes, Brother Amra?
You see, Muslims should also be aware of the 9/11 speech of President Bush. On 9/11 speech, he came up with the future strategy, and along with many other things, he was very precise in saying that we will pitch them against each other. So whatever is happening in Muslim world is not the only differences of the Muslims, it is being triggered by some other forces. So that is one strategy which I think when we are discussing our differences should keep in mind.
Brother Amra.
Jazakallah Danis for that, I think, very short, brief, but a very potent kind of presentation on the crisis and the challenges. But I think there are two things that come out very clearly in my mind, which you might have just touched upon, but I think need to be a little bit more elaborated on, is the crisis of leadership. If you remember our famous marhum Quram Murad, in his introduction to Maulana Maududi's book, Power Dynamics of Value and Change, which I urge everybody to read here, is where he says that the single most glaring problem that Ummah faces is even of leadership. And if you do a diagnostic review of the Muslim community in South Africa in particular, because I already can speak about South Africa, we have a serious crisis in leadership. We have each one pulling his own direction for his own little territories, for his own little enclaves. And the story of of Spain is glaring in front of us, and yet we have not learned any lessons from it. So there's a huge crisis in terms of leadership. And without good leaders, we will not be able to have a good ummah. Certainly, it will never happen. Secondly, I think the issue of vision is something that when I met you briefly, the first thing you asked me is whether I'm part of Muslim Vision. Yes, certainly one of the founder members of Muslim Vision. And we've been struggling for the last 20 years to get people to buy into a concept of vision. And we have not succeeded. Ibrahim Osman is here, is aging, and he spent the greater part of his retirement in trying to pursue that very concept. It seems that we have a serious crisis in understanding our faith. And I come to the last point, which has become my favorite topic recently, is the concept of maqasid of Sharia. We have lost this plot. We have lost the higher objectives of Islam and what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us as Khalifatullah fil ard. So it's very much a conceptual problem. And like you've said, it's a mind problem. And until that faith is revisited, revived, reviewed, we will certainly not make the inputs and make the change that we need to make, because we are Khalifatullah fil ard. And I think briefly again, as Umar Chopra was leaving, because I thank him for actually unpacking that concept for many of us who have not been able to access it, because the maqasid is written in such philosophical terms and such deep language that it's very difficult for people to unravel. So I just thought maybe perhaps the two issues that I raised is one of leadership and one of vision. And certainly in this country, we are in a serious crisis. We are so isolated, insulated, that we're not even going out of our communities. Jazakallah.
Thank you very much. All 3 points are very well taken. And I think we'll be having discussion on this first point on the last day of conference, leadership dynamics. I have a presentation on that. You see, when you have many leaders, you are bound to have a crisis. But it's a good crisis, not bad crisis. That indicates you have potential, indicates people think, indicates they learn how to differ, indicates there are more than one ways. And when you have many options, it's good for Ummah. We should not feel depressed because you have many opinions coming up. I look on the issue from a very different angle. I think if there is difference among a community, it's a good sign of progress. It's not a matter of egotism, it's not a matter of their own selfish plans. I have no way of knowing about how sincere they are. It's only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who knows about sincerity. But so long as they are doing something moving in correct direction, I don't mind at all having more than one leaders. What we need is perhaps more frequent interaction among leaders. That brings or synergizes those different forces. That also develops tolerance. That also creates recognition for individual work of people. that also brings us to diversify our investment. I think that's what is needed. Not that we wait for a Messiah, a charismatic leader, someone who knows everything, who can lead people. Every single person with thinking mind is a leader. And therefore we should not discourage having more leaders, but welcome more leaders. Create forums where they can sit together. Abu Hanifa was carrying over 40 leaders in one single forum. A leader of Tib and medicine, a leader of engineering, a leader of chemistry, a leader of physiology, a leader of literature, and each one will give his view on every issue. After deliberating on issues from those various angles, ultimately the Imam will make few comments, and those will be recorded by his disciple Muhammad al-Shaybani, which meant not one, but in every area a leader. Yet when you put those minds together, you find a viable fiqh. Why Hanafi fiqh became more popular? Very simple. Because of a speculative aspect, because of debate and discussion, visualizing how things will take place in the future. For others, it was right there and then problems, which they resolved. And therefore you had Maliki fiqh, Shafi fiqh, Hanbali fiqh, all coming up with their own interpretations, which were rather time-bound. Those were challenged within their own schools of thought by later scholars. But with Abu Hanifa, because of this approach of synergizing, bringing together, that's what we need today. I don't think we should feel depressed when we find conflict among leaders. It's perfectly okay for me, so long as they don't kill each other. For the second point, recently a book has come out, edited by a colleague, Imtiaz Yusuf from IIIT, and I have a paper in that, Looking Beyond Islamization, and there you will find the same approach you are mentioning developed. Also in a book that came out from Amsterdam, I have a chapter on that aspect of objectives of Sharia with reference to environmental ethics. So the approach has been developed by many writers in many parts of the world. The discipline is not that complex. Ibn Ashur's book is very simple and very easy for anyone to follow. Although Ash-Shatibi is slightly old style, but Shafi's Risala again provides a very pleasant reading. Our problem has been fiqh and not focusing on its philosophy. And therefore, anyone who goes to a school in Pakistan or elsewhere and comes back with a specialization in fiqh or ifta, by memorizing few fatawa, we think this person can solve every problem. While fact of the matter is that unless you go for the sources and go for the philosophy, that trains your mind how to solve the problem. That prepares you for future solutions, which has been abandoned by many Muslim institutions. So things are coming up, and I'm sure that this approach will help a lot in our future thinking. The second issue you raised was about visioning. Now, I think for that we need to take help from professionals. And Muslim community should organize workshops on visioning, taking help from professionals in management science who have taken up this exercise quite frequently, and having attended those workshops, developing our own strategy. We cannot depend on Eastern or Western concepts in management science. We need to have our own approach. But nothing wrong in learning from others, even from those whom we not like to follow. Therefore, community should have vision exercise where they learn how to prioritize, they learn how to think about their future needs, they learn how to analyze their data and determine. If you have a school today for 400 students and your population rate is 3.5, within 10 years you will have a serious problem. Now all those are to be linked together. What's correlation between economic development and your school size? What's mobility of people taking place? Now all those aspects need to be visualized. Only then. Unfortunately, in the Muslim world, this area has been neglected because people look for shortcuts, short gains. They are power hungry and they want to grab power as early as possible. Visioning means that you may like to have power, not today, but after 100 years. And that is a better way of having power than having it and losing it within 5 years. If you plan, you will have sustainability. If you don't plan, you may gain it, but also lose it very soon. So, visioning is extremely important in political sense, economic sense, social sense, in all areas, and we need to take that very seriously. Any other?
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
It's indeed a great pleasure to listen to this kind of a talk. I'm very worried that we, particularly in Southern Africa, we seldom hear of our leaders, our scientists in history, great scholars like Abdurrahman ibn Khaldun, Abul Hassan al-Masudi, Muhammad al-Idrisi. We hear these great names being echoed far away in the northern part of Europe. But in our Muslim avenues, we seldom not hear such great leaders being mentioned. What could be the panacea or the tablets to cure this disease that has gripped us to undermine our great scientists? Thank you.
Thank you. You know, these scientists were not made to measure. They were not created artificially. They were part of a culture and civilization. Therefore, when you have a cultural revival, a civilizational revival, you are bound to have such people. We have been subjugated civilizationally and culturally. We have lost our values, and consequently, we could not produce people of that caliber with that understanding and background. Having said that, we are not that poor either. If you look critically, in past 100 years, Muslim world has produced remarkable scientists, social scientists, scholars, strategists, but they have not been recognized by the West, and we have not given them due importance either. Pakistan is categorized as a poor country because it takes loans from World Bank and IMF and so on and so forth. But a poor country becomes nuclear power. How? With borrowed technology, with borrowed scientists. Not a single scientist from outside. All indigenous scientists did this task. Is that not something to feel proud? Is that not achievement for Muslim Ummah? Is it for Pakistan only? you find the writings of Muhammad Asad Leopold Wies read and followed in South Africa, in Australia, in Pakistan, in America. Abul Ala Maududi, all over the world. Ali Nadwi, all over the world. Many others. Is that not compatible with what we did in the past? Our problem is we underestimate ourselves. We are mentally enslaved. We feel that we are very much humbled down because of long period of colonization. I think there is need to realize we have national and international personalities. You might regard me a nationalist, but I believe that Muhammad Ali Jinnah presents a personality not for Pakistanis, but for the Muslim Ummah. A person who is educated and trained in a typical Western secular tradition, coming up with the idea that we must have an Islamic state, a 180-degree conversion, and not just a utopia, but realizing it. To me, Pakistan's creation is miracle of history, because in modern history only 2 states have come into existence on ideology, Israel and Pakistan. We were first and legitimate. They came illegitimate. So if people can achieve that, I don't think we should disregard that. We should consider them as Ummah heroes, not national heroes. Iqbal, read him and you find him not a poet, not a philosopher for Pakistan, but for the world. So we have many personalities which need to be introduced, but good thing is that we have learned not to worship personalities, and that's something good for us. We should not praise them and eulogize them and come up with the concept they are indispensable. No, I think every Muslim who thinks is potential leader and has the capacity to solve problems. So we don't have a shortage of such individuals who have made achievements. We have many of those, but it's our own short memory that we have not been able to properly record them and appreciate them. Any other contributions or questions, please? Thank you very much.
Shukran Jazilan, Professor Ahmad. I think you deserve a good rest. This was your 3rd program for the day, and we really appreciate that. In South Africa, we have this habit when we get international scholars, we run them to the ground. We make them speak every day for 2 weeks. So you're lucky you're going away on Sunday. All right, to all of you, thank you very much for attending this evening. And remember, conference delegates, we start promptly at 8:30 in the morning. So you have enough time to sleep, inshallah. We'll see you promptly at 8:30. Drive home safely, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.